Hello and welcome to Novato Tuts Plus course. I'm Adi Purdila, and in this course I'm going to introduce you to Figma, a super powerful and free design tool based in the browser. Now Figma is very similar to other design tools like Adobe XD and Sketch, but it also has a unique set of features that we're going to explore in this course. So here's how we'll break it down. First, we'll have a closer look at what Figma is and what you can do with it. Then, in the second chapter, we'll learn the basics like working with projects, files, the UI, the different tools, and also plugins. The third chapter is about using Figma as a designer, and we'll get very practical by designing a sign-up form. During this process, we'll use a bunch of different tools like components, color and text styles, auto layout, and more. Then, in the final chapter, we'll learn about using Figma as a developer and how we can use it to inspect a design file and export assets. So if you're ready, we should get started by answering the question, what is Figma? We'll do that in the next lesson, so I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we're going to answer probably the most obvious question, which is, what is Figma? Well, to put it simply, Figma is a design tool. And with it, you can create anything you want for the web, from user interfaces to illustrations to icons. So if you want to design a small smartwatch app, you can do it in Figma. If you want to design a large e-commerce website, you can do it in Figma. Illustrations, icons, no problem, because Figma is also a vector editing application, which is pretty cool. Now, Figma is a browser-based design tool, and even though it does have standalone desktop applications for Windows and Mac OS, most of the time you'll probably use it in its, let's call it natural environment, which is the browser. So you can open it in any compatible browser on any operating system, Mac OS, Windows, and Linux, which is awesome. Even more awesome is the fact that it's free. So how do you get Figma? Well, let's have a look. You would go to figma.com, and regardless of where you use it, in the browser or on the desktop, you need to have an account. So if you have one, you would log in. If you don't, you would sign up. And we'll do that. But first, I want to quickly talk about pricing. So I said in the intro of this course that Figma is a free software, and it is free. It does have this starter plan, which is free. Of course, in some regards, you are limited. So you can only create 3 projects. You have a version history of just 30 days, and you're missing out on some of the more premium features that you can see here. However, these plans, professional and organization, are only suitable for teams. So if you're an individual, or you're running a very small team, then the free plan is more than enough for you. I've been using Figma as an individual for, I think, 2, maybe 3 years now, and I never needed to upgrade to any of these plans. I'm still using the free version. So now, to get started, as I said, if you have an account, go ahead and log in. Personally, I'm going to go ahead and sign up, and I'm going to sign up with Google. And I just have a demo account set up here. And I'm just going to select design here and create account. It's really that simple. And once my account is all set up, I am greeted by this prompt here in Figma asking us to give our team a name to get started. So let's call this Tuts Plus Design. You can also do this later if you prefer. So we're going to hit next. And here I have the option to invite my teammates or my collaborators. I'm going to skip this step for now. And I'm going to choose my starter plan because I want to start with the free plan. Here, it asks you if you want the software to show you around. I'm going to hit no thanks. And I'm in. I'm now ready to use this amazing design software directly in my browser. Now, don't worry if this looks a little bit weird or different to what you're used to. I'm going to walk you through the UI and how to create projects and files in the next couple of lessons in the course. All right, so with that out of the way, let's move on and get more familiar with Figma. We'll start in the next chapter by learning how to work with projects, files, and pages. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to organize your design files by using projects and pages. So let's begin. We are at the starting screen in Figma. And in the previous lesson, we actually stopped at this screen here. Well, this is a file that's being opened. And to get to the previous screen that I showed you, to get to see all your files, you can simply go to this menu button here and click back to files. And that's going to take you to this screen. Now, there are a few ways to organize your design work in Figma. And the very first one is projects. So as you can see under our Tuts Plus Design team, we have a first project. And inside this project, I can create files. So untitled here is an example of a file. And I can double click to open that file. I can click here to rename it. So let's say, for example, file 1. And if I want to create a new file, I can simply go back to files and create one there, or I can go to file new. But let's do this. Let's select first project and right here, new file, click. And now I have file 2. And as you can see, these are both organized under first project. Now, if I want to create a new project, I can go to my Tuts Plus Design team. And here we can actually see all the projects inside or that belong to my team. And at the very top, I can select new project. I can give it a name. Here I can set my permissions. So all the members at Tuts Plus Design can either edit, view, or I can choose individual access for my members. So I'm going to select Create Project. And now inside my second project, I can create new files. And I can call this file 1 and then file 2. And it just goes on and on. So now all my files are neatly organized into first project and second project. Pretty cool. Now, inside a file, you can create multiple pages. So let's say that file 2 is a website design. And my pages could be named something like this: wireframe, design, and maybe playground for exploring new ideas. And then in each of these pages, I can have different content. Or something else I could do, let's actually open file 1. I could have maybe an app design here. And the first page would be screen 1. And then I can have a page for screen 2, screen 3, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of ways you can organize your design files. And how you name these pages, these projects, and these files is really up to you. Now you can also create multiple teams inside Figma. So my team name is Tuts Plus Design, but I can create a new one and I can call it Mobile App Design, or just Mobile App or Mobile Apps. And I can create that team. And then I can add my collaborators. And here I'm going to choose Starter for my team. So now, as you can see, I have the team Tuts Plus Design and Mobile Apps. And I can also go in here and rename my team. Let's call this Websites. All right, so I can have a team for creating websites and I can have a team for creating mobile apps. So with Figma, it's really easy to separate your various projects based on who's working on them. Just keep in mind that when you need a high number of collaborators or teammates having access to these projects, the free plan will not work for you anymore. You will have to upgrade to either the professional or the organization plans I showed you earlier. All right, so now that you know how to organize your project files, let's move on and learn about the Figma UI or user interface. And that's coming up in the next lesson. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we're going to have a closer look at Figma's UI or user interface, and we're going to learn exactly what each button and panel is doing. So let's begin. We start here in the home screen. This is where you usually land the first time you open up Figma. And the purpose of this screen is to give you access to all of your teams, all of your projects, and also some options like searching for files, seeing your recent files, get access to plugins, and also see your drafts. And drafts are basically files that don't belong to any project. Now, when you click on a team, for example, that's going to show you all the projects that belong to that team. Like, for example, here in Websites. And then when you click on a project, you'll find a list of all the files that belong to that project. And you can view files as a grid or as a list. On the right side, you have a small sidebar with information regarding your project, team, and so on. Now, let's open up a file. And this is where you'll spend the majority of your time in Figma. So let's pay a little bit more attention to this part. Let's start with the top. Here we have the main, let's call it nav bar. And at the very center, we can find the file name and the project it belongs to. And if you click on this little arrow next to the file name, you have some options like showing the version history, exporting, duplicate, rename, delete, and so on. And you can also move files to different projects. On the right side, we can see the people that are currently viewing this file. This is how we can share a specific file, either by inviting someone to view it or generating a link and sending that link to other people. Here you can open up the presentation for the prototype, and this is where we can find some zoom controls. You can zoom in, zoom out, and also turn on and off certain features for the canvas. Now, on the left side of the nav bar, we have the main menu button, which by default opens up in search. So it's really easy if you want to search for a specific operation, like for example, show grids. You can search for grid and it's going to give you all the options that contain that keyword. But also it gives you access to a more traditional menu that you would find in a desktop app. Here you can select between the various tools. So this is for move or scale tool. This is where you can create frames or create slices. This gives you access to the basic tools like rectangle, line, ellipse, polygon, and so on. This is the pen tool or pencil tool. We'll talk more about these in a future lesson. This is the text tool. This is the hand tool that you can click and drag to move your canvas around. And this is the comments functionality that you can use to give feedback on a specific file. We'll also talk more about this in a future lesson. Now, on the left side, we have a sidebar that by default will show you the layers. And if you start drawing shapes or adding any kind of elements on the canvas, the layers panel will be populated automatically. And you can select various elements either by clicking on the corresponding layer here or selecting it in the canvas, and that entry will also be selected in the layers panel. From here, you have the option to lock a specific layer, so you can no longer select it. And you can also choose to hide or show that layer. Double-clicking a layer here will enter edit mode, and you can rename that layer. And if you right-click, you get all the fun options for working with the various elements. You'll see we'll be using some of these options as we go through this course. Now, the next page is for assets, and this is where you will find all your components and all your libraries. More about these in a dedicated lesson. This is the page switcher, basically. You can create new pages. You can double-click to rename them, and you can also right-click to delete, rename, or duplicate a specific page. Now, on the right side, we can find the inspector panel. This is where you'll be altering most of the properties for selected objects. So right now I don't have anything selected, so it's giving me options for my canvas. From here I can change the canvas background, I can change its opacity, or I can hide it altogether. However, if I select, for example, this rectangle, this part will change. It's going to give me controls for changing the properties of this element. It's going to give me alignment controls, positioning controls, X, Y. I can change the width and height from here as well, rotation, and also border radius. Here I have some properties for the layer, like the blend mode, and also the opacity, and I can choose to toggle the visibility from here as well. And then I have options for the fill color. And I can add multiple fills, and when it comes to fill colors, I can choose between solid, linear, radial, and so on. We'll talk more about these in the next lesson. Then we also have options for stroke, effects, and export. So that's it for the UI. Now, just before we wrap up this lesson, I want to show you how to see the keyboard shortcuts, because Figma has a lot of keyboard shortcuts that are super helpful, and it's going to save you a lot of time when designing in here. So to see all the keyboard shortcuts, of course, you can browse through the various menus, and you can see that most of these actions have an associated keyboard shortcut. But to see them all, you can go right here, Help and Resources, Keyboard Shortcuts, or press Ctrl Shift ? And that's going to give you a list of all the keyboard shortcuts inside Figma. You can see the action here and the associated keyboard shortcut. You will see that some of these are highlighted in blue. That means you have used them before. So for example, if I'm going to use the frame tool or F, I'm going to press F. You can see that now that keyboard shortcut is highlighted. So that means I have used it. So have a look at these. They're really going to help you a lot. All right, so now that you know how to get around the Figma UI, it's time to learn about the most basic tools. And we'll start with that in the next lesson, where you'll learn about working with frames, shapes, and text. So I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we're going to start using the most basic tools in Figma. These are frames, shapes, and text. So let's begin. Let's start with frames. And what are frames? Well, first of all, let me give you a comparison with another software that you might be familiar with, Adobe XD or Sketch. Both of these use something called artboards. And an artboard is like a big container for your design, right? You would create an artboard for an app screen or a website or a web page or an icon. Well, frames are exactly the same. So I can grab the frame tool or press F on the keyboard, and I can simply click to create a default frame, which is 100 by 100. However, I can click and drag and create a frame of custom size, or I can choose from a variety of presets. So there are presets for phones, tablets, desktops, smartwatch apps, paper, social media, and so on. So let's say I'm designing an app for a smartphone and I want to preview it on an iPhone 8, for example. I can click iPhone 8, which is pretty handy. Now, with the frame selected, I can press Control or Command R to rename it, or I can double click in here. And if we look on the right side, we can swap the orientation from portrait to landscape, just like that. And we can also do something very cool, which is resize to fit. So for example, if I were to have a rectangle in here, and I do this, the frame will resize to the exact dimensions of the content. In my case, I just had a simple rectangle, so it resized to that. But if I have more, you'll see that it resizes differently. Pretty cool. With the frame selected, I can also change its size by clicking this drop down. So let's say now I want an iPhone 11 Pro Max. So I can change that on the fly, which is pretty cool. From here, I can change the X, Y. These don't really matter. With height, you can click and change these values manually, or you can click on the W or the H and just drag left and right to get the desired size. You basically have the same controls like any other shape here. Next, we can add an auto layout or layout grid. These are for a future lesson. And the rest of the controls are exactly the same as the controls for any old shape. Now, frames can be nested. So I can grab the frame tool and I can draw a frame inside of a frame. And as you can see here in the layers panel, a frame is represented by this symbol. And I can nest frames indefinitely. If I drag a frame outside its parent frame, it's going to be a top level frame. And I can go ahead and give it a fill, give it a border if I want to, It really depends on what we want to do with it. So that's it for frames, basically. Now let's move on to shapes. And in Figma, you can create the basic shapes really easily. You can go right here where it says Shape Tools, and you can choose between rectangle or R on the keyboard. You can click and drag to create a rectangle, or you can hold down Shift while doing that, and it's going to create a square. Next, you can create lines with L or the line tool. Same deal, click, drag, and if you want this to be perfectly horizontal, hold down Shift. And while holding down Shift, you can actually rotate it in increments of 45 degrees. The line by default has a stroke. It has a stroke width of 1. And there are some additional options for stroke, like adding a cap, setting how the joins are made, adding dashes, gaps, and so on. So that's the line tool. Next, we have the arrow tool, which is basically a line with an arrow at the end. And as you can see, let's actually make this a different color so we can see it better. The only thing different here is the fact that cap is now set to mixed. And I can say line arrow or triangle arrow. Very handy. Next, we have the ellipse tool, or O. Same deal. Click and drag to create an ellipse, or hold down Shift to create a perfect circle. Next is the polygon tool, which can be used to draw polygons like triangles, rhombus, pentagon, hexagon, and so on. You can basically go and change the corner count here. So 3 is for a triangle, 4 is for a rhombus, 5, 6, and you can even go really crazy and create something like this with 20 corners. I don't even know what this is called, but it probably has a pretty cool name. So that's how you can use the polygon tool. We also have a star tool that we can use to draw stars. And here you can change the count. So how many tips do you want? So this is a 3-point star, 4-point star, 5, 6, 10, and so on. And you can also change the depth or the angle between each star branch. And that's it for shapes. Really simple to use. You can find all of them here. Of course, you can create custom shapes with the pen tool or the pencil tool, but we'll talk more about that in the next lesson. For now, let's talk about the text tool. So T on the keyboard and click anywhere on your canvas to create a text. For text, you have access to the usual controls like alignment, positioning, size, blend mode, opacity, fill, stroke, but also you have access to typography controls like font family, font weight, size, line height, letter spacing, paragraph spacing. You can create text boxes. So this is now currently set auto width, but I can set it to a fixed size and I can make it bigger. And you'll see that any text that I type in here will just move on to the next line. And now I just set auto height so that it's setting its height automatically depending on the size of the text. And here, let's actually change this fill to white so you can see it a little bit better. And you also have some advanced typography controls. If you click this little button here, you'll find options for alignment, decoration if you want it to be underline or strike through. You can indent each paragraph individually. And you can also set the letter case. And you get some more advanced controls here, like for example, how the numbers look like, whether or not you can use ligatures, and so on. So it's really simple. If you just want a standalone piece of text, then just press T, click, and type your text. If you want a text box, you can press T, click and drag, and then type your text in there. And then you can always go in here and change the properties as you see fit. All right, and that's how you can work with frames, shapes, and text. Now, Figma is an interface design tool at its core, but it's also a vector graphics editor, which means it can be used to create and edit vector graphics. And to do that, it uses something called vector networks. So let's learn more about those in the next lesson. See you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to work with the pen tool and also with vector networks. And a vector network is probably one of the most unique features in Figma. So let's have a closer look at it. Now, traditionally, most design tools work with the pen tool in the following way. You would click and create multiple points, and then eventually you would come back to your starting point and you would close that path. It doesn't work in any other way. But with Figma and with vector networks, you can do stuff like this. You can create a line here, and then you can create a line like so, and then you can create a line like so. And you just created an arrow. So notice these open-ended paths. Well, you can't really do that very easily in traditional design software, but with Figma and with vector networks, it's really simple. You can even create more complex shapes. So using the pen tool or P, you can draw something like this. And then maybe something like this. You can hold down Shift to snap this to 45-degree increments. Let's draw a nice little cube here. Cool. And when you're done, just hit Done here or press Enter. And now you have a cube. To enter the vector edit mode, you can select the vector, hit Enter, or this little button that says Edit Object. So now what you can do with these vector networks is that you can select any line or any point and just move them around, delete them, add new ones. It's really, really simple. Now, Figma does this very simply for us. Notice that when I hover on a line, it gives me the option to create a new point right in the middle of that line. See? And if I click that, I just created a new point. Very simple. Now, I can also press B, or select the bucket or the paint bucket tool to add colors to my different shapes. So notice that if I hover on a shape that's already painted, I get a little minus inside the little drop. So that means it's going to remove the fill. But if I hover on a shape that doesn't have a fill, I get a plus sign, and I can add a fill to that, which is pretty cool. Now I can also click the bend tool or press Ctrl or Command, and when I click on a point, it's going to transform that point. It's going to add Bezier handles so that I can create curves. Really simple. I can also do that, by the way, when creating the vector. So I can click and I can click and hold and then move. And that's going to create this type of shape. Now, that's the pen tool. The pencil tool is more of a freehand version of creating vectors, right? So this is just another vector that I can, of course, enter edit mode, and I can grab any of the points and I can delete that point. I can move it around. I can change its curve using the Bezier handles. I can do a lot of things with it, but probably most of the time you'll be using the pen tool. Now, since we're on the topic of vector networks, you should know that any shape that you create within Figma is a vector. For example, let's take the rectangle. Right? If we select this and we enter Edit Object, it gives us the exact same controls that we had previous. We can select any of these points. We can move it around. You can hold down Shift while pressing Delete or Backspace, and that's going to automatically delete and heal. So it's going to connect those remaining 2 points. So if you were going to do that with just a simple delete, it's going to look like this. But Shift Delete, it's going to connect the remaining points. Now, at any point, you can select this and you can add a stroke. You can change the position of the stroke. Of course, the stroke color. And you can also define how the joints are. You can create some nice rounded corners here. You can add dashes to this if you prefer. And overall, it's really simple to work with these vector networks. So what can you use this for? Well, a lot of things, from creating simple icons like the arrow I showed you previously, to creating illustrations or creating some complex shapes like this. But vector networks are basically used for any basic shape that you create. I showed you the rectangle previously. Here's how a star will look like when you enter vector edit mode. It's exactly the same thing. Same goes for an ellipse or a circle. Here's a circle, and if we press enter, we can see that it's made up of 4 points that produce these curves that are basically identical. All right, and that's how you can create and edit vectors in Figma. Now, as I was saying earlier, Figma is an interface design tool, and usually interfaces use grids. It's really easy to work with grids in Figma because there is built-in functionality for that. So let's have a look at it and see how it works in the next lesson. I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you'll learn how to work with grids in Figma. Now, grids are very useful for interface design, but you can also use them for creating icons. So let's begin. Now, in Figma, a grid can only be applied to a frame. So I'm going to go ahead and create a frame. Let's say I want to create one for a desktop size. And now with the frame selected, I can go ahead and click on Layout Grid. I can either click directly here or click on the plus sign. It does exactly the same thing. Now, there are three types of grids in Figma. There is your default grid, which will give you horizontal and vertical lines, and you can determine the size of each cell. Let's say I want to make 16 pixels. That's going to create a 16 pixel cell over and over again. You can change the color and the opacity of the lines. This is very useful for icon design. Now, the second type of grid is columns. And this is what you'll probably be using most often. Basically, you define how many columns you want. Let's say 12, because this is a typical number in the most popular grid systems. And then you define the type. So stretch will basically set the width of each column automatically based on the width of your frame. The only thing you can change here is the gutter, which is the distance between each column. So let's say 40. And now you'll see that I have a much bigger gap between each column. And I can also change the margin. And that will add the number you type here to the right and to the left of the grid. So that's type stretch. You can also set it to left, and that's going to align the grid to the left of the frame, or right, which is going to align it to the right, or center. Now, in any of these types, the width of each column is set manually. So you can set it to, like, for example, 72, and then you can define the gutter. So that's the main difference. Stretch will automatically calculate the column width for you. Any of these other types needs your manual input for a column width. And finally, rows is exactly the same as columns. It has the exact same properties, except it's horizontal instead of vertical. And obviously the types here are a little bit different. Instead of having center, left, and right, you now have center, top, and bottom. And of course, you can also add stretch here, and the height of each column will be automatically calculated for you. Now, once you add your grid of choice, you can use it to align elements to it. And as you can see, the grid is visible. It stays on top of everything else. So it's really easy to move elements, to resize elements to that specific grid. Now, if you want to toggle the grid on or off, here's how you do it. You select the frame and you click this little sign here. And that's toggled off. To bring it back on, you just click this button again. There's also a shortcut, and you can find that by either searching for the layout grids option and get the keyboard shortcut here. In my case, it's Control-Shift-4, and I'm on a Windows system. On Mac, you will get a different keyboard shortcut. Or you can go down here under Help and Resources, Keyboard Shortcuts, and you would go to View, and under Layout Grids, you'll find your keyboard shortcut. So Control-Shift-4. If I press it here, regardless of what I have selected, it's gonna hide or show the layout grids. And it's gonna do that on all the frames. So for example, if I have another frame here, which has, let's say, one of the default grids, if I press Control-Shift-4, it's going to show or hide the grids on all of these elements. All right, and that's how you can create grids in Figma. Now, in the final lesson of this chapter, I want to show you how you can add extra functionality to Figma by using plugins. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you'll learn how to add extra functionality to your Figma experience by using plugins. So let's begin. I'm sure you're familiar with plugins from other applications, and a plugin is basically an add-on that adds functionality that's not native to a certain application. And Figma has the ability to install plugins. To get access to plugins, you would need to open up the menu, and you would go to Plugins, Manage Plugins, or you can go back to the files, back to the home screen, and click Plugins. Here you can see the plugins that you have installed. Currently, we don't have any. You can see a list of the most popular plugins right here. And right here on the left, you can see a list of featured plugins. Now you can choose any of these, or you can browse our plugins and you can search for a specific one. In my case, just to demo this, I'm going to search for a plugin called Unsplash, which is actually the first one that we can see here, but I'm just going to do a quick demo. So Unsplash, you can click on it. You can find more information about it. Basically, this is a plugin that grabs images from the very popular Unsplash platform and downloads them into your Figma project. You can see how many people installed this. So let's go ahead and do that as well. Here it's telling me that, hey, plugins are made by third-party developers, and by using them, you accept the potential risks. Install plugin, and that's it. Plugin installed. So now let's open up one of the projects, and let me show you how you can use that plugin. So I'm going to create a rectangle, and then I'm going to go to Menu, Plugins, Unsplash. Now this is going to open up this pop-up window here, which I can move around. And of course, this will look different from plugin to plugin. And basically with this particular plugin, I can insert a picture into my page. I can choose from a preset. I can choose a random picture, or I can search for a specific term. Let's say, for example, furniture. So I'm going to hit search, and that's going to give me a list of images that match my search query. So let's bring in this one. I'm going to click. That's going to download it, and it's going to automatically apply it as a background to my selected shape. How cool is that? Really, really simple. And if you're looking for a specific plugin, but you don't know what it's called, well, you have the full list here. and you can just scroll down and find one that suits your needs. It's really that simple. All right, and that's how you can work with plugins in Figma. So now you have all of the basics taken care of. In this chapter, you learned how to work with the basic tools, how to work with grids, and how to work with plugins. Now, it's time to do something practical with this knowledge. And we'll do that in the next lesson, where we'll design a sign-up form. And while we're doing that, we're also going to learn how to work with some of the more advanced features and tools in Figma, like, for example, auto layout, components, color styles, and more. So I'll see you in the next lesson, where we'll design a very simple sign-up form. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we're going to do something practical. We'll be designing a sign-up form, a very simple one, using, of course, the knowledge that we got from the lessons so far. But we'll also learn some new tricks and how to work with some new tools that we haven't covered yet, like components, auto layout, color and text styles, and more. So let's begin. For this lesson, I switched to the Figma desktop app for Windows. And as you can see, there's no difference than the browser-based one. Well, the only difference is that to get to the home screen, you now have a dedicated button right here, a dedicated tab, and any file that you open will be opened in tabs in this top bar here. And you also have some additional options in this drop down here, like the interface scale and the color space. But we don't have to worry about those right now. So what I'm going to do is create a new project under mobile apps, because we're going to be designing a sign-up form for a mobile app. So let's create a new project. I'm going to call this demo app, and I'm going to create a new file. And this new file is going to be called sign-up form. Now I'm going to have 2 pages in here just to help me with the organization a bit. The first page will be for assets. The second page will be for the actual screens. So let's start by defining some assets. And the very first one is the logo for the app. And I got this logo from Envato Elements. You'll find links to all the assets that we're going to be using in this lesson in the lesson notes. And I just downloaded the source files, copied, and pasted a vector version of the logo in Figma. So I'm going to call this logo. And the next thing I'm going to do is create a component. To do that, I'm going to click this little button here, or I can choose to use Ctrl-Alt-K as a keyboard shortcut. So now I just transformed that standalone element into a component. So components are elements that can be reused, and they function on a master-child system, which means the one that you see right here is a master. And if I'm going to make a copy of this, I'm now going to have an instance. I said child earlier. The correct term is actually instance. So what that means is that if I'm going to go to my master element and make a change, let's say, for example, I want to change this fill color, all the instances will be updated automatically. That's the main purpose of components. Also, components are very useful when working in teams, because you can have a centralized file with all of the components, and then your team members can use instances of those components. And if at any point you want to change the master component, it's going to change all of the instances automatically, which is fantastic. And also, any instance of a component can have different styles than the master. So it's really easy to create, for example, a button component, and then each instance will have a slightly different style. And I'll show you that in just a little bit. But for now, we have our first component, which is the logo. Next, I want to grab some icons. And for that, I'm going to use an app that's called Icon Set. And let me just bring this over so you can see it better. Icon Set is a desktop app that's free. You can use it on both macOS and Windows. And with it, you can basically add your own icon sets from your files on your computer. And then you can browse them like so. You can even search for a specific icon, like for example, Facebook. And then you can grab this icon, you can paste it, you can export it, you can use it in other software. Right now I'm using Font Awesome, the free version available for desktop, and you'll find a link to that as well. So what I'm going to do is copy this Facebook square, copy, and let's go back to Figma, paste. And actually, I think this doesn't work directly, but we can just click and drag it in. So now I have this Facebook icon. So let's resize it. I'm going to click this button that says Constrain Proportions, and that's going to resize the width and the height at the same time. And I'm going to resize this to 24 pixels, just like that. I can actually right-click, ungroup. That's going to get rid of the parent frame, and I'm just left with this vector, which I'm going to call icon Facebook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component out of it. So click this button, and now I have a component called icon Facebook. I'm going to grab yet another icon. I'm going to search for envelope, and I'm going to choose this one. Again, click, drag, and I'm going to resize this to 24 pixels. Right click, ungroup, and I'm going to call this icon envelope, or icon email would be a better name for it. Create component. Finally, the last icon I'm going to add is an arrow left, and I'm going to choose this long version here. So click, drag, resize 24 pixels, ungroup, rename this to icon arrow left, and create component. Great. So now I have all of my icons. Next, I'm going to need a button. And for the button, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to start with the text. So T for text tool. I'm going to say sign up with Facebook. I want to make this uppercase, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to set its font family to Futura PT, and font style is going to be book. That's okay. Or actually, let's go a little bit heavier, maybe medium. And font size, I'm going to select 15 pixels, and I'm going to select a 2% letter spacing. Under line height, I'm going to choose 24 pixels. Now with this, I'm going to select it, and I'm going to press Shift A. Now Shift A will add an auto layout, and auto layout is one of the most unique and powerful features in Figma. With auto layout, you basically create a frame which can have horizontal padding, vertical padding, and a certain space between items. So it's really easy for me to create a button with this. For example, I can set the horizontal padding to 24, and I can set the vertical padding to 16. And I can do a fill color. Let's keep that at white for now. Let's also add 4 pixel border radius. So now we have a rounded button. Now, the cool thing is, in a frame with auto layout, it's really easy to rearrange and add new elements. So for example, I can copy this Facebook icon and I can paste it in my button. All I gotta do is select one element within that frame, paste that element, and now I can rearrange this. I can align it to the top, to the center, to the bottom, and I can move it left or right. Also, I can change the distance between items. So the distance in my case between text and icon. Let's set that to 16. And you'll see that with this system, you can basically have any text in here and the button will resize automatically. How cool is that? One other thing that I'm gonna do is resize this to 18 pixels. I just want to make it a little bit smaller. And now see that this doesn't align with the text very well? Well, I can align it to the center from here. So the button is almost complete. The only thing that's missing is proper colors. Right now it's kind of black and white. So let's go ahead and define some colors. And to do that, I'm going to start by drawing a simple circle, something like this, and setting its fill color to 1F, 2.5, 2F. This will be my black or my dark color. Now, Figma has another cool feature that's called color styles. And with color styles, you can select an element with a specific color, and you can click this plus button to create a new style. I'm going to call this black. And now, as you can see, I have local styles, black. And whenever I create a new element and I want to use that specific color, instead of searching for the color code manually, I can just click this icon and I can choose black. And if at any point I want to change this black color, I can click anywhere on the canvas until I see local styles. Then I hover on the color I want to change. I click this icon and I can change this color to whatever I want. And you'll see that when I do that, all the elements that use that color style will change automatically. So now let's go back to our original black color. Now, let's do the same for the other colors. I'm going to define 3 more colors. So I'm going to hit Control D on Windows or Command D on Mac to duplicate my selection. And for this, to detach from a color style, you would simply click this button, Detach Style. And then I'm ready to add my new color. And that will be F51858. And I'm going to create a color style for it. And I'm going to call it Accent. Let's do that again. 5DA800. This is actually the color from my logo. And I'm going to call this Brand. And finally, let's do it one more time. 3A5998. This will be the color for Facebook. Okay, so now I have my local styles defined, What I can do to make them look a little bit prettier, I can select them all and I can do Shift A to add an auto layout. I'm going to call this colors. And I'm going to set maybe like 32 pixels in between them. So now that we have all the colors taken care of, I can select my button frame, and under fill, I can use my Facebook color. And then the text and the icon can use just pure white. And since we're here, I just want to quickly show you a very neat feature in Figma. When you select an element, a single element, you have the option to change its color under fill. When you select multiple elements, you get a new panel here called Selection Colors, which show you all the colors from all the currently selected items. So if I'm going to select my frame, you'll see that I have two colors, Facebook and white. If I'm going to select all of these elements, I have Facebook, I have the brand color, I have black, and I have white. And it's really easy to change colors like this on multiple elements at the same time. So now our button is complete. Let's call this button, and let's create a component from it. So now I'm going to select all of these, Shift A to create an auto layout. I'm going to select 32 pixels between elements, and I'm going to name this components. So now we have components, colors defined. It's time to start working on the actual screen design. For that, I'm going to switch to the screens page, F for frame, and I'm going to be using a preset for iPhone 11 Pro Max. And I'm going to press Ctrl R to rename screen 1. So how are we designing this screen? Well, we need a logo, we need a title that's specific to the actual app, and then we need some sign-up options with Facebook and with email. And further down, we need a link that says, hey, do you already have an account? Here's a link to log in directly. For screen 2, we'll just have a sign-up form. So, screen 1, let's start with the logo. I'm going to press Shift 0 to zoom to 100%. And then I'm going to switch to my assets page, local components. See how they're all defined handy in here? We can simply click and drag elements onto our page. Then, with it selected, I can hit Align Horizontal Centers to align it to my page. Next, let's add some titles. The first one is going to say Rent a Home in just a few clicks. And for the text, I'm going to use Futura PT. Font weight, I'm going to choose bold. Font size is going to be 35. And let me get rid of that uppercase. We don't need a 2% letter spacing here. Line height will be 48. And I'm going to text align this to the center. And for color, I'm going to choose the black color that we defined previously. Okay, so now just resize this to something like that. And since we learned about grids, let's add one here because grids are perfectly viable in a mobile app like this. So I'm going to select my screen. I'm going to choose Layout Grid, Columns. I'm going to choose a single column, type stretch, but I'm going to set a margin of 48 pixels. So that means I have 48 to the left, 48 to the right. And here's another thing that I can do. I can click this little button and I can create a grid style. So let's call this mobile grid. And just like with color styles, with text styles, I can reuse this on other pages. So now with the grid there, I can just reposition and resize this piece of text so that it fits our grid. And now I'm going to position this 64 pixels from this logo. For that, I'm going to hold down Alt until I see a number there, and I can use the up and down arrow keys to nudge this 1 pixel at a time. If I want to nudge it 10 pixels at a time, I can hold down Shift as well. So Shift, Alt, up and down to reposition this. Okay, next, let's add a small separator. For that, grab the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle and make it 80 pixels in width, 8 pixels in height. Let's give it some rounded corners, maybe like 8 pixels. Let me just zoom in here. And for the fill, I'm going to use the accent color. I'm going to align it to the center, and I'm going to position it 32 pixels from the text above. Now, speaking of the text above, let's select it, and let's go to Text, click this Style button, and create a new text style. Let's call it Title 1. And this will come in handy in the next screen when we'll duplicate it. Next, let's add another piece of text that says browse over 10,000 listings in your area. Now we need to tweak the properties for this a little bit. Let's detach it from Title 1 because we'll create a separate style for it. So it's going to be Futura PT. We're going to use book as the weight. Font size is 22. Line height is 32. Text align is going to be center as well. I don't need that letter spacing there. And actually, I think I forgot to remove it from this text style as well. So click anywhere on the canvas, go to Title 1 and remove the letter spacing. Cool. So now this is complete. Let's create another style for it. Let's call it Title 2. And let's move it up 32 pixels from this separator. All right. Now, since we have the same distance, 32 pixels between the separator and these two elements, we can create a frame with auto layout. So select everything, Shift A, and now if I want to change the distance between these, I can just select it and change it from here. However, I'm going to keep it at 32. So let's hide the grid for now. And let's add some buttons. For that, I'm simply going to grab the button from our components list here. And I actually want to resize this button so that it matches my grid. But currently, I don't have any option of doing that, because it has an auto layout applied to it that's set to horizontal by default. And on horizontal, I can have an auto height or a fixed height. If I want a fixed width, I would need the auto layout to be set to vertical. So we need to make a quick change to the parent, to the master component. So that change goes like this. I'm going to select the elements inside my frame, and I'm going to do Shift A to create an auto layout, which is horizontal. And then I'm going to select my main frame, and I'm going to switch the auto layout from horizontal to vertical. And I'm going to select fixed width. So now I can go back to my screen, and because this is an instance of the original button, I can now resize it to my liking. And also we're seeing that the content is still aligned to the left. So let's go and fix that. I'm going to select my content here and make sure it's aligned to the center. Okay, we're good to go. Now let's hide the grid. Let's duplicate this button, Control D or Command D if you're on a Mac. And this will be a button that allows us to sign up with an email address. But there are a couple of changes. First, we need to change the text, we need to change the icon, and we need to change the background color. That's really easy to do. Simply hold down Control or Command and click on a specific item. And that's going to expand the element here in the Layers panel. And you can select each individual element and work with it. So I can double click this text and I can say sign up with email. I can select the whole button, and instead of Facebook here, I can select brand. And finally, I can select this icon Facebook. I can right click it and I can say swap instance with icon email. And of course, I'm going to change that color to white. And here, actually, we can see that the icon doesn't look as it should. It looks disproportionate. That's because it fits within 18 pixels, just like the old icon that I had. But if we go into Assets, you'll see that our icon is actually 6 pixels wider than it is high. So how do we fix this? Well, it's a little bit tricky when working with components. So just to keep things simple, let's actually replace this icon to one that's a square format. So 24 by 24. So let's go back to icon set. I'm going to search for another envelope. And let's see if this one is a square. It is not. This one is a square. So we're going to use this one. Click, drag, and let's resize it to 24. Let's ungroup it. Let's delete the original icon email. And let's call this one icon email. And let's create a component. So now we can go back to our screens and we can swap this. We can reset it first, and then we can swap instance with icon email. Change that to white, and we're good to go. We've now created two buttons that look different by using the same component. Now we can simply select both of these, Shift A, and choose 32 pixels between the two. And now I can select this, this, and this, Shift A again to add another auto layout, and select 64 pixels between them. Finally, the last step in this screen is to add a little link right here at the bottom that says, hey, do you already have an account? Let's go ahead and log in. So let's center this. For fill, I'm going to use black. It's going to be Futura PT, book. Font size is going to be 18 pixels. 24 for line height. Let's remove that uppercase. And let's also remove the letter spacing. Align text to the center. And then this thing here is actually going to be the link. So we need to use a separate color for it. Now, when you add a color style, you cannot have different colors within that element. So what we're going to do is detach this. the fill color is still here. Now I'm simply gonna select this, fill, use the eyedropper tool, and select the brand color. So now with this, I can put it in frame 3. It's already positioned at 64 pixels because of the auto layout. Align to the center, and we're all done. Now select everything, align once again to the center, vertically and horizontally. And with that, screen 1 is complete. Now let's quickly go ahead and design screen 2. So for that, use the frame tool, select this preset, Control R for renaming screen 2, Shift 0, to zoom to 100%. And we'll start by defining the same layout grid as before. And let's start by adding one of the components, the arrow. That's going to be used to navigate to the previous screen. So let's align this with the grid. And let's position this at, I don't know, maybe 64 pixels from the top. And for color, let's choose black. But let's also set an opacity on the actual layer of about maybe 50%. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now let's add a new text that says sign up with email. And we're going to be using the Title 1 style. So click on this button, select Title 1. Now select both of these, Shift A to add auto layout, and select 32 pixels between them. Next, let's create our form. So for that, I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. Let's bring the grid back so that I can make these full width. These will be 56 pixels in height. Let's add a border radius of 4 pixels. And for the background color, I'm going to choose black, but I'm going to set a 10% opacity. So that's our input. Let's add a label to this. For that, T for text tool, I'm going to say your name. And I'm actually going to go into the button, select the text, right click, more, copy paste, copy properties. Then I'm going to select my new text, right click, copy paste, paste properties. And now I'm simply going to change its text to black, its color to black. Align this with the input and position it at 8 pixels from the input. Shift to select this as well. Shift A to add an auto layout. So now Control D to duplicate, and once more. This will be for email address, and this will be for password. So now select all three, Shift A, add 32 pixels between them. Now let's select this group and position it at 64 pixels from the text above. And now we have to add a new button for sign up. So let's grab our button from components, and we're actually gonna paste it inside our form group here. Let's align it to the left, resize it, and we'll do some changes here. For fill, we're going to use the brand color, like so. We're going to change the text to just sign up. And we're going to select the little icon, and we're going to hide it. And that's it. Finally, let's add the last bit of text there. So I'm going to copy that, paste it in, and I'm going to say this bit. Let's resize it to 318, and that's it. We've now created 2 screens for a sign-up form. Of course, you can tweak this a little bit, make it a little bit more refined, but time is of the essence with this course, so I kind of sped through it and worked as fast as I could while still trying to explain things as I was doing it. All right, so hopefully this demo gave you an idea of how easy it is to work in Figma and how powerful this is. Now, Figma can also do prototypes, can also create prototypes, and I'm going to demonstrate that using the 2 screens that I've just created. That's coming up in the next lesson, so I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you'll learn how to create prototypes in Figma. This is super easy to do, so let me show you how to do that by using the 2 screens that we've designed in the previous lesson. Let's begin. All right, so we have our 2 screens here, and just to make a quick, simple demonstration, I want to set up a prototype so that when I click the green Sign Up with Email button, it's going to take me to this second screen. And when I click the arrow, it's going to take me back to the first screen. So the way to do that is you first switch from design mode to prototype mode. Here, you can select which device you want to preview your prototype on. In my case, it automatically selected a device based on the size of my artboards, of my frames. You can choose a model. Depending on the device, you can see a preview here. You can set a custom background. And you can also select a starting frame. But first, let's start by creating the prototype. For that, you select the element that you want to interact with. In my case, it's the Sign Up with Email button. And you see this little circle with the blue border? Well, you just click and drag to the frame that you want to go to. And now, this created an interaction. You can select the trigger. So on tap, on drag, mouse enter, mouse leave, you can do a lot with this. I'm going to keep it simple and I'm going to select on tap. Navigate to screen 2. I can choose how the animation is going to be, instant or one of these other options. Let's select slide in, and I want this to slide in from the right, like so. You can choose an easing, you can choose the animation duration. So once that's done, you can click this play button where it says present, and now that's going to open up the actual prototype. And you'll see our design is being mock-upped in this device. And when we click on the button, that's going to take us to the second screen. And now if I want to go back, I can select my arrow, click and drag the arrow back to screen 1. Same thing here, on tap, navigate to screen 1, but this time I want slide in from the other direction, like so. So now I can go back here, and you'll see that when I tap, it takes me back to the first screen. And that's it. That's how easy it is to create a prototype in Figma. Of course, you have a lot of different options here, from different animations to different triggers to different actions. You can really do a lot with this. But for this course, I just wanted to give you the basic principle of creating a prototype. Now, these prototypes are usually shared with other people, either clients or members of your own team. So in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to share these prototypes and also get feedback on them. So I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the collaboration features in Figma, and you'll learn how to share your work with other people and also get feedback on it. So let's begin. Now, at any point during the design process, you can click the Share button and you can invite people by email to see your project, and you can also choose whether or not those people can edit or just view your project. Or you can copy a link by clicking on this button, and you can then choose who gets access to this file. Only the people you invited or anyone who has that link. Now, once you invite other people to a project, or you yourself get invited to a project, you can leave feedback by using the comments system. So click on this button or press C, and you get this little cursor. And at any point in any page, you can just go in, click, and you can add a comment. And you can say stuff like, for example, this color doesn't work, and you post it. And then other team members can see this, they can reply, and they can make the necessary adjustments. Once this is all sorted, you can just click on the Resolve button. This is also great for clients because they can come in, leave comments, evaluate your work, and you can communicate via the comments system. However, you do need to have a Figma account to make this work. So that's why this feature will probably be used by teams the majority of time. Now, you can also share a prototype, right? So the prototype that we created in the previous lesson, right? Over here, you have a link called Share Prototype. It's exactly the same as sharing your work. You can select who has access to this. You can invite people. You can copy links to the prototype. And when you send this link to other people, they arrive at a screen that looks something like this. And they'll be able to walk through and use the prototype just like you would. Now, to leave feedback on the prototype, you would still use the comment system. But again, you would need to be logged in to Figma in order to do that. Now, since we're on the topic of sharing work, I'm just going to quickly mention this before we wrap up this lesson. Figma is meant to be used as a collaboration tool, right? Primarily between you and your team. So you should always take advantage of the features that enable that. And one of those features is called a library. So if you go to Assets and you click this little button here that says Team Library, from the current file, which is called Sign Up Form, you can decide to publish all the components and all the styles. And once you do that, your team will have access to this library, to all of these components, all of these styles right here, and they can use them. You can decide at a later date, hey, I want to update some components in here. You can do that, and your team members that will use this feature will be able to get the updated versions in an instant, which is fantastic. Now, before we wrap up this lesson, I just want to show you one more thing that's related to sharing your work with other people using Figma. And for this, I switched to my Mac computer, where I'm running the Figma desktop app. and I'm logged in with my main account. Now I did that because with my main account, I have access to a brand new feature in Figma, or brand new at the time of this recording, and that is called Figma Community. Now, the community is a central place where you can, as it says here, explore, install, use, and remix thousands of files and plugins. So it's basically a place where community members can upload their plugins and their files and share them with other people. And then other people like you and me can access this community and download any of the files. So here is, for example, a mobile UI kit made by Tony. You can simply click on this. It gives you a nice preview of the file. You can also open it full screen. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can see a description and also a selection of information about this. And then you can go ahead and duplicate this. And that's going to duplicate it in your own Figma account. And you now have access to it. You can work with this just like with any other Figma file, which is fantastic. Here you can see all the components. You can select, you can copy, you can do whatever you want with this. Now, these files are structured in the following way: design systems, wireframes, illustrations, icons, typography elements, mobile design, web design, and UI kits. And while exploring this, you can click on any of these categories to see the associated items. You can even click on a certain tag and you'll find items that use that tag. And when you find the file that you want, simply click on it to get more information about it. You can duplicate it. You can even like it, like so. Although, to do that, you will need a Figma community profile. I'll get to that in just a little bit. And you can also click on the publisher to see what other assets he uploaded to the Figma community. Now, in the community, you're not going to find just files. You can also search for plugins. So as you can see here, right now we're seeing all assets, but you can switch between files and plugins. And this is actually the new home for plugins. You'll see that if you watch the other videos in this course, plugins were accessed a little bit differently. But here it's exactly the same story. You would find the plugin you want and you would just click install. Now, if you're part of the community, like I am now, you can actually create your own profile. So I'm going to go to my account, and where it says public profile, I'm going to click set profile handle. I'm going to set the handle that I want. In my case, Adi Purdila is available, and hit create profile. So now I'm officially part of the Figma community, and people can now find me at figma.com/@Adi Purdila. So now if I open this link in a browser, you will get to my profile page where you can only see my profile picture, my handle, and of course I don't have anything published just yet. You can also see which files I liked. So now if I jump back to Figma, I'm gonna hit done. And now this section has been updated with my handle, and I can click this link to change my handle, or I can delete my profile altogether. So now I can go back to the community, and let's say I find an asset that I really like. For example, this UI kit. And I'm gonna hit like here. Now if I'm gonna switch back to the browser, to my profile, you'll see that under likes, I have this this UI kit. Now, to publish a file to the Figma community, here's how you do it. You open up the file, and here we just have the Figma file we created with these two screens. And what you do is you go to Share, then Publish to Community, hit Publish, and this will open up the Publish dialog. You would give it a name, a description. You can add up to 12 tags that will describe your file. You can set how this asset should be previewed as. So a file or a prototype, you would select the author. And here you can also find some information about the license. And then you would just hit publish. It's really that simple. So Figma community opens up a new way of sharing your work with other people. At the time of this recording, it's still in beta because it's brand new, but already we have so many people contributing and it's fantastic. So if you don't have access to beta just yet, don't worry. This is going to be released to the public very, very soon. And you'll be able to access it as well. All right, and that's how you can collaborate with other people in Figma. Now, so far you've seen how to use Figma as a designer, but what if you're a developer? Well, we'll answer that question in the next lesson. See you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you'll learn how to inspect a Figma file and the benefits this has for a developer. So let's begin. So let's say you're a developer and you've been given view-only access to this file. And it's your job to convert this from a design to a working app. So how do you do that? Well, when you're in view-only mode, obviously you cannot delete or change the layout of any design. What you can do instead is you can select an element and you can immediately see its dimensions and also how it's positioned in relation to other elements. So for example, with this title selected, if I hover on my main frame, I can see the distance between this text and the edges. If I hover over this bit, I can see the distance between this and this. And it just goes on and on and on. And I can do the same with any other element. What's more, when I select an element, I get immediately CSS code for it. So if I select this input, we can see the CSS for it here. The width, height, left, top, the background, opacity, border radius. So all the properties that I would need as a developer to transform this into a working component in a web page. What's also nice is that if you notice in the comment, it tells me the name of the shared, or excuse me, the color style that I'm using. And speaking of color styles, if I don't have anything selected, I get access to all the local styles. So this is the button text, titles, paragraphs, basically anything that the designer created in terms of styles, I have access to it here. And I can always click on this little button and be taken to this page where I can see a preview and also get access to the CSS. And I can switch between code and a table style. Also, I can switch between CSS and iOS. This is, I believe, Swift code. And also, if I'm developing for Android, I also get code for that. And this works for any element. Here in the inspector, if I select this, for example, I can switch between CSS, iOS, and Android. That is very, very cool. Now, I also get access to the color styles, and I can see all the colors here. And I also get access to any other styles created by the designers, as I was saying previously. Here, you can also see the mobile grid that I've created previously. And by the way, if you're noticing slight differences in this design, it's because it's an older version of the two screens that we designed in this course. But I decided to show you this one because it just had a few more elements here. Now, apart from seeing all of this, you can also right-click any element in the page, and you can copy that element as text, CSS, SVG, or you can copy its properties. So by having access to these features, it's really easy to go from design to code. All right, so hopefully this answered some of your questions regarding using Figma as a developer. As you saw, it's really simple to just get accurate measurements on elements, get code that you can use, CSS code or code for iOS or Android that you can use right away, and this will just make your job a lot easier. Now, another part of the whole development process is exporting assets. So as a developer, you'll at some point be exporting certain assets as images, icons, for example, or large images, logos. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how you can do that in Figma. So I'll see you there. Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to export assets in Figma. It's really easy to do, so let's begin. Now, what I'm about to show you works in both view-only mode and also in edit mode. So to export an asset, let's say this logo, you can select it, and then in the inspector, you can click this little export link or the plus button. And that's going to give you an option to select the format you want to export it to. Currently, you can export PNG, JPEG, SVG, and PDF. We're going to choose SVG. And here you have some export settings. For SVG, this is contents only or include ID attribute. And then you can also see a preview. And then you click Export Logo, and you would save it wherever you need on your hard drive. Apart from that, you can add multiple export options. So do you want a PNG version as well? Cool. Check that. You can add a suffix to it. And you can also export at half size, 3/4 size, full size, all the way up to 4x. And you also have some additional options here. And you can also do JPEG. That's like 2x. So when you export that, it will give you a zip file. So let's save that. And let's open it. And you'll see that after we export everything, we get the logo, SVG. We get the JPEG at twice the size. And we also get the PNG at 4 times the size with, of course, transparency. Now, you can also export entire frames, not just individual elements. So you can select the frame, hit export, select your desired format, and hit export. All right, and that's how you can export assets in Figma. Now, you have a pretty complete picture of what Figma is, what it can do, and how you can work with it. And because this is a cross-platform software and it's free, it's always available there for you to try out and play around with it. So I highly recommend you do that because it's an amazing piece of software. With that said, thank you very much for watching this course. I'm Adi Purdila, and until next time, take care.